What would you do if the person who was meant to protect you was the one who destroyed you? A powerful billionaire, a hidden betrayal, a child left to die in the cold abyss of a storm-torn forest. But fate had other plans, because sometimes the abandoned don't stay lost, they come back. A journey of revenge, a past full of lies, and a shocking truth that will change everything. What if the real enemy was never who you thought he was? What would you do if you discovered the truth and it was far worse than the lie? Can revenge bring peace, or does it only create more ghosts? If you were Nathaniel, abandoned, betrayed, raised in the underworld, would you forgive or destroy? Let's dive into this gripping story. Stay until the end for the twist you won't see coming. The rain pounded against the windshield like a relentless drumbeat, a torrential downpour swallowing the night. Inside the sleek black sedan, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The only sound besides the rain was the steady hum of the engine and the occasional splash of water as the tires carved through the muddy road. Nathaniel Carter, just 3 years old, curled up in the back seat, his small frame trembling. His thin clothes did little to keep out the cold that seeped through the car. He didn't understand why his father was so silent, why his mother wasn't there, why the world outside looked so unfamiliar. "Daddy," Nathaniel's voice wavered, barely above a whisper. Victor Carter's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel, his blue eyes locked on the road ahead. He didn't answer. Nathaniel swallowed, his small hands gripping the seatbelt tightly. "Where are we going?" Victor exhaled sharply through his nose. "Be quiet, Nathaniel." The boy flinched. He rarely heard his father speak to him, and when he did, it was never gentle. But tonight, there was something else, something colder, something final. The car veered off the main road, the tires kicking up mud as they entered the forest. Trees loomed like towering phantoms, their twisted branches clawing at the night sky. Nathaniel pressed his face against the window, fear settling deep in his bones. He had never been here before. Victor finally brought the car to a halt in the middle of the desolate woods. The headlights illuminated nothing but rain and darkness beyond the trees. The moment stretched into an eternity before Victor unclasped his seatbelt and opened his door. Nathaniel watched as his father stepped out of the car. He hesitated, then scrambled to follow. "Daddy." His voice quivered as he stepped into the cold, wet night, his bare feet sinking into the mud. Victor walked around to the back and opened the rear door. He loomed over the child, his expression unreadable. Nathaniel clung to the seat, a deep sense of unease washing over him. "Where's Mommy?" Victor ignored the question. Instead, he reached in, grabbed Nathaniel by the arm, and pulled him out of the car. The boy stumbled, his tiny feet barely able to find balance on the slick ground. "Daddy, I don't like it here." Nathaniel looked up at him, his gray eyes wide with confusion. "Can we go home now?" Victor's face remained impassive. He knelt down to the boy's level, placing a firm hand on his small shoulder. His grip was strong, not comforting. "Listen to me, Nathaniel. You are not coming home." The words didn't register at first. Nathaniel blinked up at him. "What?" Victor stood, releasing him. "Stay here. Don't follow me." Panic surged through Nathaniel as his father turned back toward the car. "No. Daddy, wait. Please." He grabbed at Victor's pant leg, but the man yanked away as if burned. "Do not call me that." His voice was like ice. Nathaniel's breathing hitched. He watched in horror as Victor climbed into the car, slammed the door shut, and put the vehicle into gear. The red taillights glowed like demonic eyes in the darkness. "Daddy, please, don't leave me." Nathaniel ran after the car, his small feet slipping in the mud. His hands slammed against the trunk as the vehicle began to move. The car sped forward. Nathaniel fell onto his hands and knees, rain and tears mixing on his face. He screamed until his throat burned, but the car never stopped. The lights disappeared beyond the trees, leaving only darkness. Nathaniel sat on the ground, his tiny body convulsing from the cold and shock. He pulled his knees to his chest, curling into a ball as the rain drenched him. A deep, hollow silence swallowed the forest, broken only by the distant rustling of trees. He sniffled, wiping his face, but new tears kept falling. "Mommy will come," he whispered to himself. "She'll find me." The wind howled through the trees, bending them like twisted figures in the dark. A sound cut through the storm, a low, guttural growl. Nathaniel's breath caught. His wide eyes darted toward the trees. There, just beyond the shadows, a pair of glowing yellow eyes watched him. The creature moved forward. A massive gray wolf, its wet fur glistening under the faint moonlight. Its ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. Nathaniel didn't move. He couldn't. His entire body locked in terror. The wolf took another step, then another. The boy squeezed his eyes shut. Maybe if he didn't look, it would go away. A sudden crack of branches echoed from deeper in the forest. The wolf's head snapped in that direction. It let out a low growl before backing away into the shadows, vanishing like a ghost. Nathaniel remained frozen long after it disappeared. The night stretched on endlessly. The cold gnawed at Nathaniel's skin, his body shivering violently. Every sound, the creak of branches, the whisper of the wind, made him jolt in fear. His stomach twisted with hunger. He hadn't eaten since breakfast, and now the emptiness gnawed at him. A bush with small, red berries caught his eye. He crawled toward it, hesitating. He had seen berries before. His mother always told him not to eat the ones he didn't recognize. But Mommy wasn't here. Daddy wasn't coming back. And he was starving. He plucked one and popped it into his mouth. It was bitter and sour, but he swallowed it down. He grabbed a few more, eating just enough to ease the pain in his stomach. The rain had lessened to a drizzle by the time he found a fallen tree with a hollow trunk. Crawling inside, he curled into a ball, wrapping his arms around himself for warmth. He closed his eyes. He dreamed of home. Dawn came sluggishly, a pale light filtering through the thick clouds. Nathaniel's body ached. His face felt raw from the cold, his clothes stiff with dried mud. A distant sound stirred him from sleep. Hooves against wet earth. A wagon creaked in the distance. His eyes fluttered open. A man in a wide-brimmed hat sat atop a cart, guiding a brown horse down the dirt road. The man's gaze flicked toward Nathaniel, and he pulled the reins, bringing the cart to a stop. Nathaniel stared at him, too weak to move, too numb to be afraid. The man, rugged with dark, calculating eyes, stepped down from the cart. He crouched before the boy, scanning him with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something unreadable. Well, the man murmured, rubbing his scruffy chin. A lost little bird, all alone in the woods. Nathaniel parted his lips, but no words came. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small piece of bread. He held it out. "You hungry?" Nathaniel hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached for it. The man smiled. "Good boy." He patted the seat beside him. "Hop in. I'll take you somewhere warm." Nathaniel hesitated, his father's voice echoing in his mind. "Stay here. Don't follow me." But Daddy wasn't coming back. He climbed onto the cart. As the wheels rolled forward, Nathaniel didn't look back. He didn't need to. His past had already been swallowed by the storm. Nathaniel sat motionless in the cart, his tiny hands gripping the frayed edges of his wet clothes. The man beside him, Jonas Blackwood, flicked the reins, guiding the horse through the muddy road. The village ahead was small, run down, barely lit by the flickering lanterns outside wooden cabins. Jonas stole a glance at the boy. "You got a name, kid?" Nathaniel hesitated. His father had told him not to speak to strangers. But Daddy wasn't here anymore. "Nathaniel," he murmured. "Nathaniel," Jonas repeated with an approving nod. "Well, Nathaniel, looks like luck's on your side. Not many survive a night alone in those woods." The cart pulled up to a modest cabin at the village's edge. The wooden structure leaned slightly to one side, its windows fogged with years of smoke and dust. Jonas climbed down and reached for Nathaniel, lifting him effortlessly before setting him on the ground. "Come on inside," Jonas said, pushing the creaky door open. The room was dimly lit by an oil lamp on the table. A fireplace smoldered in the corner, its warmth barely touching the cold air inside. Nathaniel stepped cautiously over the threshold. Jonas pointed to a chair. "Sit. You must be starving." Nathaniel hesitated before obeying. Jonas disappeared into another room, returning moments later with a hunk of bread and a wooden cup filled with water. He set them in front of the boy. Nathaniel grabbed the bread, stuffing a piece into his mouth without hesitation. Jonas watched him, his dark eyes calculating. "You listen well, boy. That's good. I can tell you're a survivor." Nathaniel didn't understand what that meant. He only knew he was warm now. Safe, at least for the moment. Days passed in a blur. Jonas didn't ask Nathaniel many questions, and the boy didn't offer much. He only followed when told, ate when given food, and kept to himself. One morning, Jonas placed a small cloth sack in front of Nathaniel. "Go to the market today," he said. "Hold this out. Look sad. People will give you coins." Nathaniel frowned. "Why?" Jonas chuckled. "Because people like to feel good about themselves. And they pity kids like you." Nathaniel didn't understand, but he did as he was told. He stood near the market's entrance, holding the bag in his small hands. People walked past, some sparing him a glance, others ignoring him entirely. After what felt like an eternity, a woman stopped. "Oh, poor dear," she murmured, dropping a few coins into his sack. Nathaniel stared at the coins, something twisting in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was shame or relief. When he returned, Jonas grinned. "See? Easy. The world's full of people with too much money and not enough kindness. You take what you can." Nathaniel quickly learned that the world was not kind. A week after his first trip to the market, he wandered a little too far down an alley. Well, a voice sneered. Nathaniel turned to see three older boys, their clothes ragged but their eyes sharp with mischief. "A little beggar boy, huh?" another taunted. "Think you're better than us?" Nathaniel shook his head, stepping back. The first boy smirked. "I don't like beggars in my alley." The first rock struck Nathaniel's shoulder. He yelped, stumbling back. Another hit his leg. "Stop," he cried. The boys only laughed. They shoved him to the ground, mud splattering his clothes. Nathaniel curled up, arms over his head, waiting for the beating to stop. And then it did. A shadow loomed over him. The boys went silent. Nathaniel peeked up. Jonas stood there, his face unreadable. "Go home," he told the boys. His tone was soft, but there was something in his eyes that sent them scattering. Jonas knelt down, grabbing Nathaniel's chin. "Did you fight back?" Nathaniel shook his head. Jonas sighed. "Next time you do, no one's going to save you, boy." That night, Jonas gave Nathaniel a new lesson. Fighting isn't just about fists, kid. It's about knowing when to strike and when to wait. Jonas demonstrated, moving with surprising agility for a man his size. He taught Nathaniel how to dodge, how to read an opponent's movements, how to stay one step ahead. "You're small," Jonas said. "Use that. Be quick, be smart, and never let them think you're weak." Nathaniel absorbed every word. He listened. He learned. By the time the bruises from the alley faded, he was no longer the same boy who had cowered in the dirt. Jonas leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching as Nathaniel eyed the crowd in the market. "That one," Jonas murmured, nodding toward a merchant's stall. "Watch him. See how distracted he is. That's your chance." Nathaniel's heart pounded. He had never stolen before, but Jonas' voice echoed in his mind. "Be quick. Be smart. Don't let them see you." He took a deep breath and moved. His small hands darted out, snatching a loaf of bread from the stall just as the merchant turned to haggle with a customer. He slipped back toward Jonas, heart still racing. Jonas grinned. "Not bad, kid. Not bad at all." Nathaniel looked down at the stolen bread. There was no guilt, just the understanding that this was the world now, and he was learning how to survive in it. The streets of Willow Creek were a tangled mess of winding alleys, crumbling buildings, and shadowed corners where the desperate thrived. Nathaniel moved through them with ease now, slipping between merchants and townsfolk without a second glance. Jonas walked beside him, his keen eyes scanning the market. "You've learned well," he murmured. "You move like you belong. That's what separates a good thief from a dead one." Nathaniel nodded. The bruises from his past mistakes had taught him well. No longer did he fumble or hesitate. He had become swift, invisible. He had learned to read people, their distractions, their blind spots. He was no longer just a street rat. He was something more. Jonas smirked, as if sensing Nathaniel's shift in confidence. "All right, let's see how well you do alone today. I have business to handle." Nathaniel's pulse quickened, but he masked his nerves. He gave Jonas a slight nod and melted into the crowd, his hands already itching for their next target. That evening, Nathaniel returned to Jonas' hideout, a dimly lit underground den that smelled of stale liquor and old leather. Jonas sat in his usual chair, his boots propped up on the wooden table. He was speaking with a man Nathaniel had never seen before, one dressed in finer clothes than the usual criminals Jonas dealt with. "Carter doesn't tolerate loose ends," the man was saying. Nathaniel froze at the name. Carter. His heart pounded. He knew that name. Jonas leaned back, unimpressed. Victor Carter has no reason to come sniffing around here. Nathaniel barely heard the rest of the conversation. His mind spiraled. His father was still alive. He wasn't some distant ghost lost to time. He was real, and he still held power. For years, Nathaniel had buried thoughts of him. But now, the past was forcing its way back in. The realization burned inside him like fire. He could no longer stay under Jonas' control. He had spent too many years being a tool, a weapon for someone else's gang. He needed to break free. Nathaniel began stashing stolen coins, hiding them beneath the floorboards of the hideout. He studied the roads leading out of Willow Creek, memorizing every path. But Jonas was not a fool. One night, as Nathaniel tucked away another handful of coins, Jonas' voice cut through the darkness. "Planning something, kid?" Nathaniel turned slowly, masking his expression. "Just being prepared." Jonas stepped forward, his presence heavy. "You think you can run? After all I've done for you?" Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "You didn't save me. You used me." Jonas chuckled, shaking his head. "And what do you think the world is? People using people. You leave here, you'll be nothing. A nobody." Nathaniel met his gaze. "Then I'll be nobody. But I won't be yours." Jonas said nothing for a long moment. Then he smirked. "Let's see if you can make it out then." Jonas gave Nathaniel one last job. A test, or perhaps a punishment. A high-profile mansion theft. Nathaniel knew it was a trap, but he also knew it was his chance. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped inside the estate. His movements were precise, his breath steady. He avoided the guards with practiced ease, his fingers brushing against the polished surfaces of stolen wealth. Then he saw it, a stack of documents laid out on a desk. He had no intention of taking them, until he saw the name, Victor Carter. His blood turned to ice. He scanned the pages, ledgers, transactions, business secrets his father had kept hidden. But why were they here? Why did Jonas care about Victor Carter's dealings? Nathaniel stuffed the documents into his bag. This wasn't just about escape anymore. This was about answers. Nathaniel returned to the hideout just before dawn. Jonas was waiting for him, arms crossed, a knowing smirk on his face. "You did well," Jonas said. "Too bad you won't be keeping any of it." Nathaniel tensed as Jonas' men stepped forward, blocking the exits. His fingers twitched toward the knife at his side. "You really think I'd let you walk away?" Jonas laughed. "I made you. You belong to me." Nathaniel took a deep breath. Then he moved. The fight was fast, brutal. He was smaller, but quicker. He used every lesson Jonas had ever taught him against him. A sharp jab to the ribs, a kick to the knee. The room exploded into chaos. Jonas lunged at him, but Nathaniel ducked, slamming his knife into the wooden table instead. The older man stumbled, surprised by the resistance. For the first time, Nathaniel saw something in Jonas' eyes that had never been there before. Doubt. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. He ran. He bolted past the guards, through the narrow alleys, his feet pounding against the cold ground. Behind him, Jonas shouted, but Nathaniel didn't stop. He disappeared into the city. And this time, no one would own him ever again. Nathaniel stood on the rooftop of an abandoned building, his eyes fixed on the glowing Carter Industries tower. The skyline around it pulsed with life, but inside that building was a man who had thrown him away like nothing. And tonight, Nathaniel was finally making his presence known. He pulled a small black envelope from his pocket and placed it carefully inside the mail chute leading directly to the CEO's office. The envelope contained a single photograph, an old picture of a 3-year-old child standing in the rain. On the back, written in red ink, "Did you think I wouldn't return?" Nathaniel smirked. Let the game begin. Victor Carter sat in his expansive office, sipping whiskey, oblivious to the storm brewing outside his glass fortress. He barely glanced at the stack of mail his assistant had left on his desk, until his fingers brushed against the black envelope. Something in him froze. Slowly, he opened it. His breath caught in his throat as he pulled out the photograph. His hand shook as he turned it over and read the message. A chill crawled up his spine. This wasn't possible. Nathaniel was dead. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carter, security reports an unknown figure was seen on the lower levels. They say he left." Victor's grip on the photograph tightened. "Find out who it was. Now." As his assistant hurried off, Victor swallowed the lump in his throat. He had spent years trying to erase that night from his mind, but the past had just knocked on his door. Nathaniel watched from the shadows as the security scramble began. He had expected panic, but the sheer paranoia gripping Victor's men was amusing. They were searching for a phantom. He slipped inside through an unguarded maintenance entrance, his movements swift and silent. He knew this building, its blind spots, its security rotations. Years of preparation had led to this moment. Making his way to a private floor, he found a control panel. A few keystrokes, and the security footage from the last hour was wiped clean. Another few, and all Victor's confidential files were copied onto a portable drive. He paused, then typed out a simple message on Victor's personal screen. "You left me in the dark. Now I'm pulling you into it." With a final keystroke, the building plunged into darkness. Victor slammed his whiskey glass onto his desk as the lights flickered out. The emergency power hummed to life, but his office screen showed the words that sent a cold sweat down his back. He grabbed his phone. "Henry, get my car ready. I'm leaving." "Sir, the security system has been breached," his head of security responded. "Whoever is doing this. I know who it is." Victor snapped, his heart pounding. "Just keep him away from me." As he stormed down the hallway, he felt eyes watching him. He turned sharply, but the corridor was empty. His breath came in short gasps. Nathaniel wasn't just coming for revenge. He was toying with him. Victor climbed into his waiting car, his bodyguards surrounding him. As the driver pulled out onto the darkened street, Victor wiped a hand across his face. He had to think. He had to get ahead of this. Then he saw him. Standing on the sidewalk, just beyond the reach of the streetlights, was a lone figure. A dark coat billowed slightly in the night breeze, and piercing gray eyes locked onto his. "Nathaniel." Victor's blood turned to ice. He barely managed to croak, "Drive. Now." But Nathaniel didn't move. He simply watched, an almost amused expression on his face. And as the car sped away, Victor knew the truth. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. Nathaniel sat in his hideout, the dim candlelight flickering across the stolen documents he had taken from Carter Industries. He had expected ledgers, business transactions, and corruption, but what he found was something much more sinister. There, buried in the records, was a name he had never seen before but now sent a chill down his spine: Elias Crane. Nathaniel frowned, scanning the documents again. Elias had been a silent partner in Carter Industries for years, moving in the shadows, influencing deals, making decisions that even Victor Carter hadn't signed off on. He clenched his fists. Who the hell are you? His father had abandoned him, but this smelled like something worse. Victor wasn't the mastermind behind his fate. Someone else had pulled the strings. And now Nathaniel needed to find out why. Nathaniel didn't wait. He moved through the city under the cover of night, slipping past security, climbing the walls of Carter's estate like a phantom. Inside the study, Victor Carter sat alone, staring at the same black envelope Nathaniel had sent days ago. His whiskey glass trembled slightly in his grip. The moment he sensed movement, he spun around, reaching for his desk drawer. "Don't bother," Nathaniel said, emerging from the shadows. "I'm faster than you." Victor's face paled. You're alive." Nathaniel smirked. Disappointed? Victor exhaled, slowly placing his glass down. "What do you want?" Nathaniel tossed the file onto the desk. "Answers. Tell me about Elias Crane." Victor's expression darkened. He ran a hand down his face, suddenly looking much older. "I should have known you'd find out." Nathaniel crossed his arms. "Start talking." Victor leaned back, his fingers tightening on the desk. "Elias was my business partner, long before you were born. He had power, influence, and a ruthless mind. When you were born," he hesitated, "he convinced me that keeping you would destroy everything I had built." Nathaniel's breath caught, but he kept his voice steady. "So you threw me away because he told you to?" Victor looked away. "I told myself it was my choice. But it wasn't. Elias has always controlled the game. And if he knows you're alive, he won't let it stay that way." Nathaniel left the Carter estate without another word. His father was pathetic, but now he wasn't the primary target. Elias Crane was. With careful precision, Nathaniel tracked Elias' movements. The man operated like a ghost, never leaving a trace, never appearing anywhere without calculated purpose. His estate was heavily guarded, his men well-trained. But that didn't matter. Nathaniel had survived the streets, the cruelty of the underworld, and the betrayal of the man who should have protected him. A fortress wasn't going to stop him. From a rooftop across the estate, Nathaniel watched through his binoculars. Inside, Elias Crane sat in a grand study, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier light. He was smiling as he spoke to someone on the phone. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. It was time to introduce himself. Getting inside was the easy part. Avoiding detection? That was another story. Nathaniel moved through the halls of the estate like a shadow, slipping past guards, dodging security cameras. Every step brought him closer to the study. As he reached the door, he heard Elias' voice from within. Victor always was weak. He never had the stomach for permanent solutions. Nathaniel pressed his back against the wall, heart pounding. Yes, Elias continued. But it's fine. I'll handle it. Nathaniel smirked. I'd love to see you try. In one swift motion, he kicked the door open. Elias turned, unfazed, a knowing smirk curling his lips. Ah, Elias said. I was wondering when you'd come. Nathaniel took slow, measured steps forward. You ordered my father to get rid of me. You orchestrated my entire life. And now you're acting like this is a friendly visit. Elias folded his hands on the desk. Because, Nathaniel, it is. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes. What the hell are you talking about? Elias sighed. You think this was ever about you? You were never the goal. You were simply collateral. Your father was getting too powerful, too difficult to control. I needed leverage. A weak spot. And you were it. Nathaniel's pulse pounded in his ears. You ruined my life for business leverage? Elias shrugged. No one is untouchable, Nathaniel. Not me. Not you. Your father made a choice, and so did I. The question is, what choice are you going to make now? Nathaniel's fingers twitched toward his knife. He had waited years for this moment. He could end Elias right here. But then what? A realization settled over him. He wasn't just here for revenge anymore. He was here to end the cycle. Nathaniel stepped back. You don't get to control me anymore. I make my own choices now. Elias chuckled. Then let's see how long you survive. Nathaniel turned and walked out. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, he was fighting it on his own terms. Nathaniel crouched on the rooftop of Elias Crane's sprawling estate, the city lights behind him casting his shadow long and sharp. The night was silent, save for the rustling wind and the distant hum of traffic. Below, security guards patrolled the perimeter, but they weren't looking for ghosts. Tonight, he was the storm in the shadows. Scaling down the side of the building, he slipped through a second-floor window. The study was just as he remembered it from his surveillance. A grand room lined with leather-bound books, an expensive decanter of scotch on the desk. And in the center of it all sat Elias Crane, calmly stirring a glass of amber liquid. I was wondering when you'd arrive, Elias murmured, not even looking up. You've made quite the mess these past few weeks. Nathaniel stepped forward, his knife glinting in the dim light. You took everything from me. My life, my past, my family. Elias finally met his gaze, his dark eyes devoid of fear. Did I? Or did I simply set things in motion? It was your father who cast you away. I merely made sure you stayed forgotten. Nathaniel's grip tightened. And now? You think you can talk your way out of this? Elias exhaled, setting his glass down. No, I expect you to do what you came here for. Nathaniel lunged. The fight was swift, brutal. Elias, for all his calculated control, was no match for years of training, for the rage that fueled Nathaniel's every strike. Within moments, Elias was on his knees, blood seeping through his pristine white shirt. Nathaniel pressed the blade to his throat. Give me one reason not to kill you. Elias smirked, even as he bled. Because if you do, you become exactly what I made you. A killer. A shadow. Just like me. Nathaniel's breath came hard and fast. The choice had never felt heavier. Nathaniel left Elias Crane's estate without looking back. The man was finished. Not by a blade, but by the knowledge that his empire would soon crumble. There was one last stop to make. Victor Carter sat alone in his mansion, staring into the fireplace, a drink clutched in his trembling hand. He turned as Nathaniel stepped inside, and for the first time, there was no anger in his eyes, only exhaustion. You're still alive, Victor muttered. Nathaniel scoffed. Disappointed? Victor shook his head. No, just tired. Silence stretched between them. Years of pain, of unanswered questions, hung in the air. Why? Nathaniel finally asked. Why did you let them take me? Victor closed his eyes. Because I was weak. I let Elias convince me that you would ruin everything I built. And when I realized my mistake, it was too late. Nathaniel studied the man before him. For so long, He had wanted this moment, to watch Victor Carter beg, to see him break. And yet, there was no satisfaction in it. "I could end you right now," Nathaniel said, his voice even. "Erase you like you erased me." Victor nodded. "You could, but then what? Would it bring you peace?" Nathaniel stared at him. Then slowly, he lowered his knife. "No, it wouldn't." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Victor alone with his regrets. Nathaniel found himself standing outside Anna Whitmore's orphanage, the warmth of the small, run-down home contrasting with the cold air of the night. He hesitated before knocking. Anna opened the door, surprised. "Nathaniel." He nodded, then looked past her into the home. Children's laughter echoed down the hall, and in the corner sat a small boy, curled up with a blanket, his wide eyes mirroring a look Nathaniel had once worn himself. Nathaniel nodded toward the child. "Who is he?" Anna sighed. "Another one left behind. No name, no family, just waiting." Something in Nathaniel's chest tightened. He knew that feeling all too well. "He doesn't have to wait anymore," Nathaniel murmured. "I want to help." Anna smiled, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Then maybe you finally found what you were looking for." Nathaniel stood on the rooftop of a nearby building, watching as dawn broke over the city. The skyline stretched before him, vast and full of possibilities. For years, he had lived in the dark, chasing vengeance like a man with nothing else. But now, for the first time, he saw another path. He pulled out an old photograph, the same one he had sent to his father. The image of a boy, abandoned in the rain, staring up with lost, pleading eyes. Nathaniel exhaled, then let the photo slip from his fingers. The wind carried it away, disappearing into the morning light. Nathaniel walked through the quiet streets, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. The city had not changed, but he had. For so long, he had believed his only purpose was revenge. Now, he realized there was more. There had to be. As he reached the orphanage once more, the door opened before he could knock. The small boy stood there, looking up at him with cautious hope. Nathaniel crouched down, offering the boy a rare smile. "Come on, let's get you something to eat." The boy hesitated, then took his hand, and together, they stepped forward, towards something new. When does revenge stop being justice and start becoming another prison? Nathaniel Carter spent years preparing for revenge, only to discover a deeper betrayal that destroyed everything he believed in. Was his father truly the monster, or was he just another pawn in a much more sinister game? And more importantly, was revenge ever the answer, or was his greatest victory breaking the cycle of pain? What would you have done in Nathaniel's shoes? Would you have walked away like he did, or would you have ensured justice was served, no matter the cost? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more thrilling narratives full of twists, betrayals, and shocking revelations, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's always another mystery waiting to be unraveled, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.